Welcome to another captivating Sovereign Diplomat episode. In this video, we're diving deep into the heart of the conflict between Israel and Iran, answering the questions that are keeping you up at night. We'll explore what sparked these tensions and whether we're witnessing the build-up to an inevitable war. You'll learn how a regional conflict could reshape the Middle East and impact global powers. We'll also tackle the burning question, is there still hope for peace? Or are we past the point of no return? As we uncover the hidden forces at play, from religious ideologies to political maneuvering, you'll gain insight into the key flashpoints that could ignite a larger conflict. We'll also examine the diplomatic efforts working behind the scenes to de-escalate the situation. We'll explain how a potential war could send shockwaves through global economies, especially oil prices, and what it might mean for you financially. And for those following the global power struggle, we'll reveal how major players like the US and Russia are influencing this high-stakes geopolitical showdown. So let's dive in. To understand the current tensions between Israel and Iran, we need to take a step back and look at the historical context of their relationship. Surprisingly, Israel and Iran weren't always at odds. In fact, during the reign of Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the two countries maintained relatively friendly relations. This period, lasting from the 1950s to the late 1970s, was characterized by economic cooperation and even some military collaboration. However, the landscape dramatically shifted with the Iranian Revolution of 1979. The new Islamic Republic, led by Ayatollah Khomeini, adopted a staunchly anti-Israel stance, refusing to recognize Israel's right to exist and supporting Palestinian resistance movements. This ideological shift marked the beginning of the hostile relationship we see today. Several key events over the past few decades have further escalated tensions. In the 1980s and 1990s, Iran began supporting militant groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza, both of which have engaged in armed conflict with Israel. This proxy warfare strategy has been a significant thorn in Israel's side. The situation took another turn in the early 2000s when Iran's nuclear program came under international scrutiny. Israel, viewing a nuclear-armed Iran as an existential threat, has been at the forefront of efforts to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons. This has led to a series of covert actions, including cyber attacks like the Stuxnet virus in 2010, widely believed to be a joint Israel-US operation targeting Iranian nuclear facilities. More recently, the conflict has spilled into Syria, where Iran has been supporting the Assad regime and establishing a military presence. Israel sees this as a direct threat to its security and has conducted numerous airstrikes against Iranian targets in Syria. The assassination of Iranian nuclear scientists, often attributed to Israel, and Iran's threats to annihilate the Jewish state have further poisoned the relationship. The 2015 Iran nuclear deal, officially known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, briefly seemed to offer a path towards de-escalation. However, the US withdrawal from the deal in 2018 under the Trump administration, strongly supported by Israel, reignited tensions. Since then, we've seen a series of tit-for-tat actions, including attacks on ships in the Persian Gulf and strikes on each other's assets, bringing us to the heightened state of tension we see today. In recent years, we've seen a dramatic escalation in tensions, with both nations engaging in a dangerous dance of confrontation and retaliation. One of the most significant recent escalations occurred in April 2021, when Iran's Natanz nuclear facility suffered a major explosion. While Iran called it an act of nuclear terrorism, many experts believed it to be an Israeli covert operation. This event not only heightened tensions, but also pushed Iran to announce it would begin enriching uranium to 60% purity, far beyond the limits set in the 2015 nuclear deal. The conflict has also spilled into international waters. Throughout 2019 and 2020, we saw a series of attacks on oil tankers in the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. While Iran denied involvement, many of these incidents were attributed to Iranian forces by the international community. Israel, in turn, has been accused of attacking Iranian ships, particularly those suspected of transporting oil or weapons. In the air, we've witnessed an increasing number of drone incidents. In February 2022, Israel shot down what it claimed were Iranian drones heading for its territory. Conversely, Iran has accused Israel of using drones to attack its military installations. These unmanned aerial vehicles have become a new frontier in the ongoing shadow war between the two nations. On the military front, both countries have been steadily building up their capabilities. Israel, already possessing one of the most advanced militaries in the Middle East, has been focusing on missile defense systems like the Iron Dome and David's Sling. These systems are designed to intercept everything from short-range rockets to long-range ballistic missiles. Iran, for its part, has been investing heavily in its missile program. The country has developed a range of ballistic missiles capable of reaching Israel and has been working on improving their accuracy and payload capacity. Additionally, Iran has been strengthening its cyber warfare capabilities, seen as a cost-effective way to counter Israel's technological superiority. Perhaps most alarmingly, Iran has continued to advance its nuclear program. While maintaining that its nuclear ambitions are purely peaceful, the country has been enriching uranium to ever higher levels and restricting international inspections. This has led to growing concerns in Israel and the international community about how close Iran might be to developing a nuclear weapon. As we speak, the situation remains incredibly tense. Military exercises, weapon tests, and strong rhetoric from both sides continue to fuel fears of an imminent conflict. With each passing day, the risk of a miscalculation or an unintended escalation grows, keeping the entire region on edge. But what could actually spark a full-scale war? Let's examine some of the key flashpoints and most volatile issues that could potentially ignite a larger conflict. First and foremost, Iran's nuclear program remains the most significant flashpoint. Israel has repeatedly stated that it will not allow Iran to develop nuclear weapons, viewing it as an existential threat. If Israel believes that Iran is on the verge of creating a nuclear weapon, it might feel compelled to launch a preemptive strike. Such an action would almost certainly lead to a wider conflict. Another potential trigger is the ongoing shadow war between the two countries. The covert operations, cyber attacks, and assassinations we've discussed earlier could easily spiral out of control. If either side were to miscalculate and cause significant casualties or infrastructure damage, it could provoke a more overt and large-scale military response. The situation in Syria presents another volatile flashpoint. Iran's growing military presence in Syria, close to Israel's northern border, is seen as a direct threat by Israel. If Iran were to establish a permanent military foothold in Syria or transfer advanced weapons to its proxies there, Israel might feel forced to take more decisive military action, potentially leading to a direct confrontation with Iranian forces. Speaking of proxies, the activities of Iran-backed groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza are another potential trigger. These groups have engaged in conflicts with Israel in the past, and a significant escalation, such as a large-scale rocket attack on Israeli population centers, could prompt a major Israeli response. If Iran were then to directly support these groups in a conflict, it could quickly evolve into a wider war. The Strait of Hormuz, a crucial waterway for global oil shipments, is another flashpoint. Iran has threatened to close the strait in response to sanctions or military actions against it. Any attempt to do so would likely lead to international intervention, potentially drawing Israel into a larger conflict. Lastly, we can't overlook the potential for accidents or misunderstandings to trigger a war. In such a tense environment, a misinterpreted military exercise, an errant missile, or a misidentified aircraft could spark a chain of events leading to open conflict. The volatility of these issues is compounded by the lack of direct communication between Israel and Iran. Without diplomatic channels to de-escalate tensions, misunderstandings or miscalculations become more likely and more dangerous. Now that we've explored the potential triggers for war, let's zoom out and consider the global implications of a conflict between Israel and Iran. Such a war would not be confined to these two countries. It would send shockwaves through the international community, affecting global powers and reshaping alliances. First, let's consider the United States. As Israel's closest ally, the US would almost certainly be drawn into the conflict, either directly or indirectly. This involvement could range from providing military and intelligence support to Israel to engaging in direct confrontation with Iran. Such a scenario would significantly impact US foreign policy, potentially requiring a large-scale military deployment to the Middle East and straining relationships with countries that oppose intervention. Russia, on the other hand, has cultivated closer ties with Iran in recent years. A conflict could see Russia providing diplomatic cover for Iran in the UN Security Council or even supplying military assistance. This would inevitably lead to increased tensions between Russia and the West, potentially reigniting Cold War-style global divisions. China, as a major economic partner of Iran and with growing interests in the Middle East, would also be significantly affected. While China typically avoids direct military involvement in regional conflicts, it might be forced to take a more active diplomatic role. A war could threaten China's Belt and Road Initiative investments in the region and disrupt its energy supplies from Iran. European powers, many of whom are signatories to the Iran nuclear deal, would face a complex dilemma. They would be torn between supporting their NATO ally, the United States, and by extension Israel, and their efforts to preserve the nuclear deal with Iran. This could lead to significant strains within NATO and the European Union. In terms of international organizations, the United Nations would be thrust into the spotlight. The UN Security Council would be the primary forum for diplomatic efforts to end the conflict, but deep divisions among permanent members, particularly between the US and Russia, could paralyze the body, much as we've seen in other recent conflicts. The International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, would also play a crucial role, especially if the conflict involves Iran's nuclear facilities. The organization's inspections and reports would be key in shaping the international community's response. Regional organizations like the Arab League and the Gulf Cooperation Council would face immense pressure. Member states would be forced to choose sides, potentially leading to internal fractures. This could reshape the political landscape of the Middle East for years to come. Moreover, a conflict could severely test the limits of international law and institutions. The use of force, potential war crimes, and the legality of preemptive strikes would all come under intense scrutiny, potentially setting new precedents in international relations. Economically, a war could lead to a redrawing of global trade routes and energy partnerships. Countries heavily dependent on oil from the region would be forced to seek new suppliers, leading to a reshuffling of international economic relationships. While we've discussed the geopolitical and strategic aspects of the Israel-Iran conflict, it's crucial to understand that beneath these lie deep-seated ideological and religious factors. These elements not only fuel the conflict, but also make it particularly challenging to resolve. At its core, the conflict involves fundamental differences in religious and national identities. Israel defines itself as a Jewish state, the homeland for the Jewish people. On the other hand, Iran, since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, has established itself as an Islamic republic guided by Shia Islamic principles. This basic difference in national character sets the stage for ideological friction. The role of religion in this conflict is multifaceted. For many Israelis, their connection to the land is rooted in biblical history and religious texts that describe it as the promised land for the Jewish people. This religious claim to the land is a fundamental aspect of Zionism, the movement that led to Israel's establishment. Conversely, Iran's post-revolution ideology is deeply rooted in Shia Islam. The concept of velayat-e-faqih, or guardianship of the Islamic jurist, forms the basis of Iran's system of government. This ideology sees the spread of Islamic governance as a religious duty, putting it at odds with the idea of a Jewish state in what Iran considers Muslim lands. Moreover, Iran's leadership has frequently called for the elimination of Israel as a state, viewing its existence as an injustice against Palestinians and a symbol of Western imperialism in the Middle East. This stance is not just political, but is often framed in religious terms, with some Iranian leaders describing Israel as a cancerous tumor that must be removed. The conflict is further complicated by competing interpretations of religious prophecies. Some factions within both countries view the conflict through the lens of eschatological beliefs about the end times, which can make compromise seem not just difficult, but heretical. It's important to note that these religious factors intersect with nationalist ideologies. In Israel, the concept of a Jewish state is tied to ideas of national self-determination and security after centuries of persecution. In Iran, opposition to Israel is linked to a broader anti-imperialist stance and a desire for Islamic unity against perceived Western dominance. The influence of these competing ideologies extends beyond the borders of Israel and Iran. They shape alliances in the region, with Sunni Arab states increasingly aligning with Israel against Iran, despite historical opposition to the Jewish state. This shift demonstrates how geopolitical concerns can sometimes override religious differences. These ideological and religious factors also impact internal politics in both countries. In Israel, religious parties often hold significant political power and influence policies regarding settlements and peace negotiations. In Iran, the regime's opposition to Israel is a cornerstone of its revolutionary ideology, making any softening of this stance politically risky. It's crucial to understand that while these ideological and religious factors are deeply entrenched, they're not monolithic. Both Israel and Iran have diverse populations with a range of views. Many Israelis support a two-state solution with Palestinians, and there are Iranians who oppose their government's stance on Israel. However, the dominant narratives in both countries continue to be shaped by these fundamental ideological differences. Despite the intense hostility between Israel and Iran, diplomatic efforts to ease tensions and prevent conflict have been ongoing. The most prominent diplomatic initiative in recent years has been the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, commonly known as the Iran nuclear deal. Signed in 2015 by Iran, the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, Germany, and the European Union, this agreement aimed to limit Iran's nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief. While Israel was not a signatory, the deal was seen as a way to reduce the risk of conflict. However, the JCPOA faced a major setback in 2018 when the United States, under the Trump administration, withdrew from the agreement and reimposed sanctions on Iran. Since then, efforts to revive the deal have been ongoing. The Biden administration has expressed willingness to rejoin the agreement if Iran returns to compliance, and indirect talks have been taking place in Vienna. Another significant diplomatic channel is the European Union's efforts to mediate between the US and Iran. The EU, particularly through the efforts of its foreign policy chief Josep Borrell, has been trying to broker a compromise that would bring both parties back into compliance with the JCPOA. The United Nations also plays a crucial role in diplomatic efforts. The UN Security Council has been a forum for debate and resolution passing regarding Iran's nuclear program. The International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, a UN body, continues to monitor Iran's nuclear activities and report on its compliance with agreements. The potential for this conflict to escalate has profound implications for global security and stability. First and foremost, an open conflict between Israel and Iran would significantly destabilize the entire Middle East region, which is already fraught with tensions. Such a conflict could quickly draw in other regional powers, potentially leading to a wider war. Countries like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and other Gulf states which view Iran as a threat might be compelled to support Israel either overtly or covertly. On the other hand, countries like Syria and non-state actors like Hezbollah in Lebanon would likely support Iran. This regional polarization could shatter the delicate balance of power in the Middle East, leading to a protracted conflict with global repercussions. The conflict's impact on global oil supplies cannot be overstated. The Middle East remains a crucial source of oil for the world economy. Any disruption to oil production or transportation, particularly through the strategic Strait of Hormuz, could send oil prices skyrocketing. This would not only affect energy security worldwide, but could also trigger a global economic crisis, impacting everything from transportation to manufacturing and potentially leading to widespread inflation and economic instability. From a broader perspective, an Israel-Iran conflict could exacerbate existing tensions between global powers. The United States, as Israel's closest ally, would likely be drawn into the conflict, either directly or indirectly. This could lead to a confrontation with Russia, which has been supporting Iran, particularly in Syria. China, with its significant economic interests in Iran and the wider Middle East, would also be affected. The potential for miscalculation or escalation between these major powers in the context of this regional conflict poses a serious threat to global security. Moreover, such a conflict could have severe implications for nuclear non-proliferation efforts worldwide. If Iran were to accelerate its nuclear program in response to conflict, it might encourage other countries in the region to pursue nuclear capabilities, leading to a dangerous arms race. This could undermine the global non-proliferation regime and increase the risk of nuclear materials falling into the hands of non-state actors. The ripple effects of this conflict on other regional disputes could be significant. For instance, it could impact the ongoing conflicts in Syria and Yemen, potentially escalating these situations. It might also affect the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, likely hardening positions on both sides and making a resolution even more challenging. Furthermore, a major conflict in the Middle East could exacerbate the global refugee crisis. Large-scale displacement of populations could lead to a new wave of refugees seeking safety in neighboring countries and Europe, straining resources and potentially fueling social and political tensions in receiving countries. The conflict could also have far-reaching effects on global counter-terrorism efforts. A destabilized Middle East could provide fertile ground for extremist groups to expand their operations. This could lead to an increase in global terrorism as these groups exploit the chaos to recruit, train, and plan attacks both within the region and internationally. In essence, a war between Israel and Iran would not just be a regional conflict but a global crisis. It would test existing alliances, force nations to take sides, and potentially lead to a significant restructuring of the international order. The ripple effects would be felt far beyond the Middle East, affecting geopolitics, global economy, and international institutions for years, if not decades, to come. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more geopolitical stories. With that said, thanks for watching.